For much of American history, the city was the center of everything. Places like New York, Chicago, and Boston were dense, walkable environments where residents could find work, entertainment, and daily necessities within a few blocks of their front door. Streetcars connected neighborhoods, corner stores lined nearly every block, and apartment buildings sat directly above the shops that occupied their ground floors. These cities were not simply places to live. They were the economic and cultural engine of the entire country. When taking a look at photographs of American cities from the early 20th century, you see streets filled with pedestrians, vendors, and transit lines running down the middle of major avenues. The street grid was there, of course, but the mix of uses and the density of activity gave American urban centers a character that made them genuinely walkable environments. People who lived in cities during this period did not necessarily need a car to manage their daily lives, because almost everything they needed was already nearby. That relationship between Americans and their cities began to shift dramatically after World War II ended in 1945. Soldiers returned home in large numbers, the economy expanded rapidly, and there was a widespread national desire for a new kind of life, one with more space, more privacy, and a home that felt separate from the noise and congestion of the urban core. In 1934, the Federal Housing Administration had already been created, and its loan programs made it far easier for families to purchase single-family homes on the outskirts of cities than to buy property in dense urban neighborhoods. It's worth understanding why so many families found this arrangement genuinely appealing. Suburban neighborhoods offered something that crowded city blocks simply could not: space. Houses had yards, streets were quiet, schools were new, and the overall environment felt safer and cleaner than many urban areas of the time. For families with children, particularly those who had grown up in cramped city apartments, moving to the suburbs represented a meaningful improvement in their quality of life. But while suburban expansion was satisfying demand from one portion of the population, it was simultaneously pulling resources away from the cities those families had left behind. When higher-income residents moved out, they took their tax dollars with them. Cities raised money by taxing property within their borders, and as residential and commercial property values in urban cores declined, the tax base that funded schools, transit systems, and public infrastructure shrank considerably. Some cities managed to weather this transition, but others, including Detroit and Cleveland, entered decades of sustained decline from which they have never fully recovered. Another key factor in play is the way federal infrastructure spending was distributed during this period. A significant share of transportation funding was directed toward new roads and highway extensions serving suburban areas rather than toward maintenance and improvement of existing urban systems. Studies have estimated that approximately $450 billion per year in federal subsidies collectively incentivized suburban sprawl, and that money often came at the direct expense of older cities and their surrounding communities. Sprawling suburban developments require roads, water lines, sewer systems, and fire protection, all of which cost money to build and, more importantly, to maintain. Research suggests that the infrastructure required to service suburban development can cost more than $21,000 per unit, and that maintaining this infrastructure becomes increasingly expensive as it ages. Unlike dense urban environments where tax revenue per square foot is extremely high, suburban neighborhoods often generate far less revenue than they require to sustain the services built to serve them. The most sprawled American cities spend roughly 50% more per capita on public infrastructure annually than cities with more compact development patterns. A city's core may cost 5 or 10 times more per foot to maintain than a suburban street, but that same foot of urban property can generate 50 to 100 times more in tax revenue than its suburban equivalent, making dense urban investment far more financially efficient over the long run. Meanwhile, the American cities that were once the most prominent examples of walkable urban life have spent decades trying to adapt to a model that was never designed with them in mind. Transit systems that once served dense populations have seen ridership decline as more residents move to car-dependent areas. Businesses that relied on foot traffic followed their customers outward. Neighborhoods that had once been thriving commercial corridors were left with vacant storefronts and reduced services. What makes this history particularly significant is the scale at which these decisions were made. This was not simply the result of individual families choosing where to live. It was the product of federal loan programs, highway construction projects, zoning laws that prohibited mixed-use development, and agricultural subsidy structures. Over the course of 20 to 30 years, that direction became the dominant pattern of American settlement. Today, the consequences of that pattern are still being worked through. Some American cities have seen significant reinvestment in recent decades, with downtown areas attracting new residents and businesses in ways that would have seemed unlikely 40 years ago. Others continue to struggle with the long-term effects of suburban disinvestment. How cities and suburbs adjust to shifting population preferences, aging infrastructure, and changing economic conditions will determine what the next chapter of the American urban story looks like.